All right. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We've got a number of people from across the world here today. I'm Daniel Allen from the Manhattan Borough President's Office, and I hope you're all enjoying Open Data Week. Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and to Kate from Beta NYC for doing so much in the organizing here. If you haven't had a chance, there are a ton of fantastic Open Data Week events. Feel free to check them out at opendata-data.nyc. Our office is particularly fond of this event. Gail, the Manhattan Borough President, founded the Open Data Law back in 2012. So this is a great celebration of everything that's grown out of that New York City, and also getting to see what people are doing across the world. So why don't we jump right into this? First, we have five panelists with us today. Terry Moore from the Things Network, New York City. Terry does a lot of work with IoT and sensors, and he also runs MCCI and creates some of his own sensors. So looking forward to hearing from him. We've got an international presence here today. Judith Veenkamp from Veenkamp, from the Netherlands, as the lead of Smart Citizens Lab at WAG. So very excited to hear from her. Greg Johnson, Code for South Florida. Local areas doing a lot of work with solar powered sensors down in Florida, and looking at connecting citizens and government through air quality data. Wendy Brawer is the co-founder of LES Breathe of the East River Park Action. She's a fantastic local organizer I've talked to on a million different issues, and can provide a great kind of local knowledge here. And Sruti Modekurty is the platform lead at OpenAQ, which is truly, I think, one of the organizations that embraces the ideals of open data more than almost any other, and is really great at looking at sharing that information across the world. So I don't want to talk too much, so why don't we kick it off? I think each panelist is going to do a quick 5-minute talk on some of the things that they've been working on, so they can give you a little bit better in-depth knowledge on what they're working on, more than I can. So why don't we start with Terry from the Things Network New York. Terry, take it away.
Thanks very much. So the Things Network New York is a nonprofit that's deploying community-owned, open source wireless networks, free access in New York City, and we're helping people all over the world to do this. Next slide, please. This talk is about what we've been doing at Grant Houses, which is a New York City Housing Authority NYCHA project on the Upper West Side, close to Gail Brewer's office on 125th Street. This is one of the larger, if not the largest of the large public housing things. It's like 7,000 units. And what we've been able to do, if we can go to the next slide, is take advantage of the advances in technology to allow us, instead of having a study that runs with scientists asking the questions and then recruiting subjects, we've asked the community members who are going to be the subjects of the study, what do you want to know? And then we've worked together with local scientists, local tech companies to figure out how to do that measurement cost effectively. So the Borough President's Office and Daniel were instrumental of the people to make the study possible, including us, the Tenants Association, for the research component of this. But the key request was for quality. Let's find out how the air quality is in our apartments, because they live there and they think it might be bad. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so I mean, this shows you the diameter of things. The stuff that we're really interested in is actually the furthest to the right, because as you get down to the 1 micron, if you click one more time, you'll see the 0.3 microns. These are particles that can get into the bloodstream. So we can go to the next slide.
So
And then
you're
we
on
can
the
play
one
the
that
next slide.
describes the project, the zero cost wireless sensing.
There we go.
Great. So my lightning talk today will be about sensing air quality, but then also can a sensing network be a prototype for a participatory policy context? That is basically a quest that we're on currently. Next slide. So this is the building where my organization is located. It's a really nice castle that I haven't been in for quite some time due to all the corona measurements. But we are a public research institute where we research the impact of technology on society. Next slide. And I'm the lead of the Smart Citizens Lab, which is basically a lab where we try to find out what happens if you give technology to citizens and basically put them central in also hosting the technology, understanding the technology. And well, the image on the right is what we usually use for our communication. And it says on the top, smart city, and beneath the camera, the sensor, stupid citizens. So basically it's what we try to push for is, shouldn't we push for smart citizens instead of smart cities? And that is what we focus on in the lab. And we do that on a whole range of topics and domains. Next slide, please. Yes, and air quality is one of them. And we have, well, basically our biggest project right now is on air quality. And we set up three sensing communities, but the most interesting one is this one, where we're looking at the second largest steel factory of Europe. It's called Tata Steel, and it's located it's actually quite close to Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, but it's a bit sort of to the northwest of Amsterdam, close to next to the North Sea. And what you see here, the pink area, that is the factory location. And then you see Wijk aan Zee, that is the small village that is basically enclosed by the factory train. And then on the right, there's also a whole urban district. So the factory grounds are really, really close to the living environments of people, which is a large problem because the steel production causes a whole lot of air pollution. Next slide. And when we started with the project, there was, of course, there was always concern about what this steel production and the air pollution did for people's health. But when we started, there was actually something special because there was this graphite rain that basically came down on people's houses, gardens, and people found this sort of silvery dust basically everywhere. It was so small that they had to keep cleaning their cars, their windows. They found it in the basically anywhere. So the relation between citizens and the formal institutes, the government, the local government, the regional government, really, went bad, so to say. And people started organizing quite heavily and also had a clear urge to collect their own data to understand their situation themselves better. And next slide, please. And this is what they had to deal with. So this is sort of the complex system world where you see that the Tata Steel, so all the arrows pointing to the sort of the logo of the steel factory. This was the whole bureaucracy, or is the whole bureaucracy that is organized around the steel factory, that have a responsibility when it comes to giving permits, monitoring the situation, controlling also if they actually live up to the sort of the norms that were set in the permits, etc. So there is a whole range of organizations that have to deal with the factory, and you as a citizen have to sort of navigate your way through this system world, which is quite a challenge. So we brought basically this top-down sort of the formal organization of the system world together with the citizen initiatives that were popping up here and there, and basically said like, okay, what can we do by deploying a citizen sensing network? Can that be a mean to bring this this sort of bottom up, top down level together and let them collaborate in a more constructive manner than just sort of everyone, digging digging themselves into their own positions. Next slide, please. So we set up this citizen sensing network. You see here the same area as you just saw with the pink area of the steel factory. But this is, well, this was a screenshot from today, but these are all the sensors that we have deployed currently. And we basically were able to organize the community and to create ownership with citizens to adopt the sensor, to collectively decide, like, where should we put it? What do you want to measure? What kind of questions do you want to ask to the data? And we've been doing that for 2 years now, and actually created quite a bit of ownership on the sensing network itself. And it has been proven to be a very constructive, platform basically to work together with the local government, the regional governments, and to have constructive conversations on this issue that is so, that is quite complex and challenging. Next slide, please. So this Hollandse Luchten, Dutch skies, what is it? Now that we've been working in this project for 2 years, it becomes more and more visible that what started as just setting up a technical system with sensors hosted by citizens, that this can actually be a very interesting context for participatory policymaking. So now we're basically on this threshold of, okay, how can we take the next step with the data collection and making sense of the data, and then also having impact with the data. And it turned out that for sort of the government layer, it's a place to communicate, to collect the data, and also integrate local expertise from the citizens themselves in the policy that they make. And for citizens, it's a very interesting place to get in touch with formal organizations, ask questions, build knowledge together, and create empowerment. Next slide, please. And so it provides agency for all participants to play a valuable role in understanding and solving this challenge on air quality. And what is so interesting is that, so the relations were very tense when we started, but in this sort of bubble of the project of the citizen sensing network, we created a space where people participate on the basis of equality. And here we sort of we collect the data together. Citizens have also control over the sensor and over the data, and then also create a stronger position in this challenge on air quality. And it contributes to capacity building, to citizen science research and science research as well, and hopefully also to policy information. Next slide. So, but then it's of course a very interesting journey. It's a very positive journey, but it's also a very challenging journey. So we have a couple of crucial questions that we are currently encountering. So how can we organize sustainable engagement of citizens? It's one thing to participate for a set period of time and to participate in, let's say, 2 to 3 meetings, but what if it's there to stay? Like, how can you keep people involved and also committed? Then the second one is, how can we validate the data and insights in policy? Because it also means that the governments and the sort of the way that they make policy should be opened up, and that they should be willing to create value with the data that is collected with citizens. But that is actually quite a challenge for these big organizations that have their own pace and their own structure of working. And then thirdly, can we develop this project to a sustainable ecosystem based on the idea of a commons? So it's something, not only the technical infrastructures of the sensors, of the data, but also this whole ecosystem with all the parties that we have engaged currently. That is basically what we want to move towards, but it's still quite a challenge to get there. So I'm very curious to hear also what your ideas on this are, and if you have suggestions on tips or experience that might help us forward. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, Judith. As a policy analyst, the mapping of all of the different partners who can be involved in one project hit me right here, and definitely is a little bit PTSD for me. I think Greg Johnson is going to do our next lightning talk from Code for South Florida. Greg, are you ready to have your slides in front of you?
All right, I'll kick it off then, and thank you so much, Wendy. So my name is Gregory Johnson. I am the executive director for an organization called Code for South Florida. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We focus on the South Florida area, and over the last 7 years, we've worked closely with municipal and county, as well as research institutions. The project that I'm going to talk to you about today is called Local Air. Local Air is a collaboration between public and private institutions here in Miami-Dade, as well as with the city of Miami, where we deployed low-cost sensors that had solar-powered panels, and we brought them across Miami Metro Rail through public transit during a pandemic when typically there's a price to go on the Metro Rail, so now it was free. So what we were doing is we were tracking kind of like air quality in these areas with Black and brown communities. You can go to the next slide. So when I originally came into working on kind of these low-cost sensor projects, I had an ideal mindset of a technologist, right? Because I work in technology, so I'm thinking, okay, there's one cloud and there's one thing, and every organization goes to that and they pull the information, and everybody knows who has privacy, who has specific access to it. Privacy and security standards are there. And what I quickly found out is no, it doesn't work like that. Can you go to the next slide, please? What it actually looks like is this. As we worked with the city of Miami and county and resilience teams and organizations, we quickly found out that everybody had their own kind of like environment going on and their own data sets around air quality. And what we found is that it was really fragmented and siloed. For instance, if you're trying to create a citizen science network around this type of work, it becomes really challenging because there's so many moving parts. So we looked at that as kind of a problem, and we asked ourselves, how can we address it? Next slide, please. So through Microsoft, they gave us some sensors. They're called Project Eclipse sensors. These are these little hardware sensors still in research from Microsoft. They sent it over, and they were looking for a use case around that. Because it was challenging finding and getting all those different stakeholders, we came up with our own use case. We looked at Black and brown communities, we looked at high transit areas, and we said, let's place some sensors in these areas because there hasn't been traditionally any air quality data on these things. We also looked at different organizations that were doing a lot better job at open air quality data, like OpenAQ. And we said, you know what, let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's look at what they're doing. Let's see if we can pull from some of that so we can make sure that our work is really grounded in community. What that looked like is me going out into these communities, such as in Overtown in the first picture, to set up these air quality sensors. Also working in near streets and sidewalks and bus stops, as well as putting them in hard to reach places so people didn't play around with them. Next slide, please. And then building a service on top of that. So last year we called it localair.org. Through the website, you can visit it yourself. You can kind of see a sensor map, and for the stakeholders that were part of it, we gave them a visualization. And we quickly realized is that this isn't enough. Just putting sensors up there, collecting data, people don't know what to do with this data. We gave them these fancy visualizations, and we got questions about like, okay, how do we make this a little bit more simplified? So then we asked ourselves, if this is confusing for people that are even working in government in different roles, what does this mean for people that are average, everyday citizens that are probably not going to look at this data and see anything meaningful? So we decided to focus on how do we simplify that? Next slide, please. So we looked at connecting data to insights and actions, and we looked at that as a measurable goal of this is very important. We looked at looking at specific metrics. For instance, the sensors do ozone, carbon dioxide, particulate matter. And we also, again, leveraged OpenAQ for this. So this like illustration you see here is from OpenAQ. Next slide. We then worked with the city and county on an infrastructure level and focused on asking them questions around how do they do data sharing amongst their different groups. Through this work, what we decided to do was, we know the service level component of getting air quality data to the right people is difficult, but we know they're sitting on a lot of data between governments. So what we did is we asked them, who's holding or who's in charge of the data? What we decided to do is map out a process around it and build basically a framework for how they can start leveraging low-cost data and sharing it between the municipal and county. That was a big step. Next slide. What we ended up doing was getting them on Azure, Microsoft Azure Cloud, and getting them all access to a specific tenant that shared resources of what this data was being collected in OneDrive. And then we were able to give them kind of like access and control to that. And we then were able to kind of like map out the requirements. Every government has like security requirements. So we're able to map that out for them. And what we found is that this was incredibly helpful. Next. So where are we today? Today, City is actually, we created a vendor company to work with City of Miami to scale environmental sensors all across, so not just in air quality. 2, we're helping them with their smart city program, not just to create a smart city, but to really focus on what does this look like when interacting with residents. The work that we did last year, what we're doing right now is going up to residents and saying, hey, how does transparency around what's happening in the built environment look to you? And how can this be helpful to your everyday life? 3, building better data governance. We came up with a small infrastructure like model for low-cost air sensors. Now what we're looking to do is seeing how we can extend that. What if the governance of data was as easy as going to your Dropbox or going to your Netflix? We envision a world that makes it easy for people to interact with their environment and see the purpose, use of technology, and the use of their data in the public spell. Thank you.
That was great, Greg. Thank you so much. It's always interesting to hear, kind of what's going on in other areas. And, definitely interesting to see, how different governments kind of react to, kind of looking for cooperation and looking for a little bit of help. Definitely interested in chatting with you a bit more about that. I think next we have Wendy Brawer from Lower East Side Breathe and East Park Action, River Park Action Coalition. Wendy, you want to take it away?
Thanks so much, Daniel. I'm learning so much from everybody here. It's really thrilling. We're pretty new, our group, but we want to talk to you about the air quality and health impacts of the East Side Coastal Resilience Project, also known as ESCR, on New York City's Lower East Siders. So step back to 2014, and on the left, you can see the big U, images of what our park was planned to look like once this project won Rebuild by Design's $335 million in 2014. So our section, as you can see in yellow on the right, is what is ESCR. So it's really East River Park is the first compartment of the big U, and that's 58 acres running from 25th Street down to Montgomery. So we had a nature-based plan, but in 2018, the city threw out that plan that had lots of buy-in from the community. And the plan moved up to 1.45 billion, and the plan included raising the park and then raising the park 8 feet for a levee. And it was designed for 2050. Even the New York Times said to save East River Park, the city intends to bury it. The image on the lower right is really more of the final plan. These were some of the early ones. And you can see right in the middle of it, big tennis center, lots of ball fields. But what's really got upsetting to me was the plan to take down nearly 1,000 mature trees as part of this process. And this is the city's data mapped out. On the top and on the bottom is the park as it is right now. So you can really see what we're losing on this edge. And a close-up view on the top left here shows you what the tree loss actually is going to look like. Now, just beyond the park is the FDR Drive with 6 lanes of traffic. And beyond that is several NYCHA buildings that house about 9,000 people. So they're, with the bridge and everything else, this is a constant reality. Loss of trees is really significant in this area. As you can see, there's major work going on in the NYCHA campuses right now that is FEMA funded, Sandy repairs and resiliency. Moreover, in 2014, the plan came with a major upland planting of trees, bioswales, and other stormwater management things. which haven't happened yet. Just getting started. So we're losing trees all over. We're lots of impervious surfaces. And I want you to just see who some of the people who use the park every day. Rain, shine, snow, it doesn't matter. The park is really thronging, especially, of course, this year with COVID. This is our health resort. This is our Disneyland. But while the park was, it's going to be a staged construction, but it's going to go on for many years. So there's mitigation. And you can see there's not much other green space in our community. And that most of the mitigation on the left is artificial turf and sports coating. The net new space is really Pier 42. And you can see it on it's pretty much, that's most of it. You can see it on the right here, that we're going to be not have access to parks or waterfront space from the Esker project, as well as the Brooklyn Bridge to Montgomery Coastal Resilience Project. And all that's going to be open is this pier in the middle. On the bottom, you can see the city's design with very high fences, no shade, not much access to an unobstructed view. But back to the Big U. There were about 850 people who came to the charrettes over the years. But when the plan changed, East River Park Action and allied groups started getting people out, coming to meetings, protests, petitioning. Over 15,000 people signed. And I started getting really worried, thinking about no matter what happens, whether the plan changes or not, we will always have these smokestacks. We will always have the FDR. We'll always have the bridge. So how can people in this community, especially as COVID is getting worse, and you just saw that great statistic from Greg, how important access to clean air is. So together with other neighbors who are part of East River Park Action, we started LES Breathe. And moreover, this neighborhood is already an environmental justice zone. This is the new area map that has just come out, and we're in it. We already had higher asthma rates, less physical activity, higher poverty rate. And as you can see, even COVID, our death toll from COVID in this area is higher than the rest of Lower Manhattan. The park has another really vital function besides air. It's inspiration, it's solace, it's so much, it's our community commons. It's beautiful regardless of the weather. So we formed this group, LES Breathe, Lower East Side Breathe. And one of the first things we did is we started looking at the soil. And we found that there is lead underneath the Williamsburg Bridge. We already knew that there's a old Superfund site at the north end of the park where there was a manufactured gas plant. And we foiled the city on the studies they've done. And that was released in December, and there's about 2,000 pages that Public Lab is helping us sort through. We got more organized and realized how complicated this project is beyond just choosing a sensor. Where do you put them? How do you track them? Who's going to crunch the numbers? How do you help interpret them so people in the community can use that information in a way to protect their own health and to make better choices going forward? How do we iterate the project and keep collaborating to make it better? And that's just the sensors. There's so many layers. And then we started thinking about the social side. Should we use something like Story Voice for qualitative data so people can tell their stories? Should we start building DIY air filters? How do we organize, train, debrief, and market all of this when we're a tiny group of people? And you can see us working here with the air beams that Michael Hamdigger loaned us, along with an Android, so we could start getting used to using these tools. Here we are at the amphitheater making our first test. There's other monitors in place because of this construction. So this is at the north end of the East River Park right now, and there's already the contractor has to put out monitoring systems. And you can see how many there are. But what you can't see is the data they create. So there's going to be a quarterly report that's given to the community advisory group, not community as a whole. how is that supposed to help us protect our health right now? I've added a couple historic pictures so you can see that East River Park is actually built from fill to begin with. So what's coming is 1 million tons more fill are coming to being barged to the park, trucked around, flattened. It's going to be a multi-year process and pretty dusty. This report came out last week on the use of air casting. This image on the left, this is directly across the bridge from us. We really don't know yet what to expect when we're get ours going, but you know, we've looked into so many different kinds of sensors already, and realizing when I just saw this when I met Sruti last week, OpenAQ's amazing aggregator. You can actually see the results from all the different types of sensors at once. But we have a dearth of sensors. We don't have many monitors at all. If you compare New York City to San Francisco, where there were so many fires last year, you can really see that there's a big gap here. As I'm wrapping up, I just want to touch on this idea of helping people protect indoor air quality. Some of it's about the products we bring into our house, but other things, could we start to build DIY air filters with people? And why do it this way with an inexpensive box fan and HEPA furnace filters? People don't have a lot of money there. And even if they did, even if they weren't paying their own electric bill, etc., Con Ed is right there. So any additional power used is actually kind of a reduction in air quality. It's how do we look at both of these things at the same time, knowing that a lot of people don't have air conditioner, they may not even have a fan, and they're right there exposed 24/7. So I want to wrap up by saying thank you to everybody who's been helping us and advising us so far. It really does take a village, and we welcome people to get involved with us. I expect to learn so much now, and I'm happy to pass this now to Sruti at OpenAQ to hear more.
Thanks so much, Wendy. And you all have done such a great job of setting up this presentation, I think. Thank you for all of the shout out. So I'm Sruti Modekurty. I'm the platform lead at OpenAQ. Next slide, please. OpenAQ is a 501c3 that is focused on fighting air pollution with open data and community. Next slide. So the challenge, I think, many of my colleagues have articulated really well today, is that there's a lack of access to air quality, often in the most polluted places. When air quality does exist, it's in an inconsistent or temporary or a different data format. And this leads to data silos, but also people silos, where people from different industries aren't working together. And all these challenges combined makes it so that it prevents civil society from taking adequate action to actually improve air quality in their local communities. Next slide. So this is where OpenAQ comes in. Like, our mission is to really take air quality data and then merge that with community to create a healthy air quality ecosystem. And build the foundational data infrastructure to empower communities like Lower East Side or people in Miami, so that they can use the data and open source tools to actually fight for improvements in air quality in their communities. Next slide. So one of the core offerings that we have is the OpenAQ Platform, which others have talked about today. We have over 2 billion real-time and historical air quality measurements, and we basically aggregate government as well as low-cost data sources and bring them all onto the platform and make it available for anybody to pull and use for free. We used to focus on just government air quality data, but we realized that there are huge data gaps. There are also an increasing number of low-cost sensors being deployed, and we wanted to make sure the platform reflected this change in the ecosystem. So we, as a pilot, we added in low-cost sensors from CMU, Purple Air, the Environmental Defense Fund, and also Habitat Map, which Wendy had mentioned. It's a New York City-based nonprofit that manufactures sensors. They're awesome. And with that, we were able to increase coverage to 120 countries. And you can check out this map on openaq.org. Next slide. The other unique feature about the platform is that it's completely open source. So you can see the data ingest mechanism, the website, the API, and it's not just we're a tiny team. We're a team of 3. It's not just to save resources, but it's also to make sure that people are able to make it their own and replicate it and really bring the global community around this issue. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned before, all this 2 billion measurements that we have, you can access in various ways. You can download it directly from the website. You can use the API. Lots of people have created apps based off of the API. You can use AWS to query the data and download the data. And you can check out the API docs and more at docs.openaq.org. Next slide, please. Yep. So I mentioned OpenAQ Community. So OpenAQ Community is, really a mix of awesome people from all around the world. One example of the community coming together is somebody in Mongolia noticed that people in Bosnia were actually hand writing down. They would capture daily air quality measurements by hand because it would show up for the day and then get erased for the next day. And so somebody in Mongolia actually wrote an adapter to ingest the data onto the platform. So now that data is available for not just those people in Bosnia, but anybody who's interested in that data. And Smokey, the air quality chatbot, is another community created app that uses the API to contextualize air quality in people's communities and make it a little bit friendlier for people to understand, what's actually happening with air quality in their community. Next slide. So in addition, to bring together this community and to make sure that we're addressing the needs of different communities, we hold international workshops. So on the left, you see a picture from a workshop we held in Delhi. The right is Sarajevo. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do this in the past year due to the pandemic, but we hope to resume these in the meantime. And in the meantime, we actually launched an ambassador program. And you can read about them. They're awesome on our website. But the idea is that we can help scale OpenAQ's impact, but make sure that the work that we're doing is still contextualized and stays within the community. Next slide. So just some use cases. The World Resources Institute, along with NASA, has been pulling in data on the platform to create forecasting for cities in Latin America. Again, NASA is also working with the city of LA to create machine learning models to look at hyperlocal air pollution trends. It's merging regulatory low-cost sensor and satellite data to be able to get some of that information. Also, had data used for the global burden of disease. Next slide. Something top of mind. There's this really cool study that looked at 34 countries to see how the impact of the lockdowns affected air quality. And this was only possible because they could quickly access all of these different data sources from the OpenAQ platform. Next slide. And one of my favorite impact stories is we held a workshop in Accra, brought together people from all different sectors. They basically created a community statement saying that we need to increase coverage of air quality monitoring. This caught the attention of some researchers at Columbia who donated air quality monitoring, and I just spoke to them this morning. They've set up most of their sensors, and we were discussing tools that we can build to help people analyze the data, so that to increase air quality expertise, but also make sure that people in the community understand the impacts of air pollution. Next slide. So how can you help or get involved? We're actually hiring. Love for you to join our team as a senior software engineer. You'll be working closely with me, the platform lead. As I said before, it's an open source platform, so we'd love for you to help us bring on new data sources or solve bugs or add enhancements to the platform. And definitely let us know about any new data sources that you have, like low-cost sensors, government networks, and your community initiatives. Next slide. We definitely want to hear from you. Feel free to reach out through GitHub, through email us. We also have a Slack that has over 1,000 people, and we're actually having some interesting discussions in our low-cost sensors channel. And I'd welcome you all to come and join the discussion and share knowledge between different initiatives. And yeah, thank you so much. I'll post the links in the chat.
Great, thank you so much, Sruti. That was amazing. Obviously, love all the work you folks do over at OpenAQ. Really quickly, just because I am conscious of our time constraint here, Terry, were you able to figure out your technical issues?
Well, the proof's in the pudding, but let's just go back to one or two of my slides, and I'll do a really quick summary.
Fantastic.
So, I mean, in contrast to the other presentations, we're looking at indoor air quality, which is an area that has not been studied very much. It's recently become an area of more interest, not only because of, I mean, even before the COVID thing and all of the health implications of air quality became clear, this is where you spend most of your time is in your bedroom and in your apartment, even in normal times. So this is, and there hasn't been a lot of study. So let's go on to the next slide. I don't want to spend too much time. So we've developed some low cost sensors. So on the left, you can see that this is a very small sensor. We took advantage of the pause in the project that came because of the pandemic to actually hard tool the case and cost it down a little bit. This is about, the retail price is about 150. The project is paying $100 for the sensors. And we think that these can actually be, if we can scale volume, we can get these out to the world at about $100. We're using free long range networking technology called the Things Network, based on something that's called LoRaWAN. This means that basically we can take advantage of zero cost backhaul from the sensors. So we've added TVOC because indoors TVOC is really kind of interesting. There's a lot of methodological questions about that, but we want to get some data and see what we can find out. So we've been working. We sort of lack on the marketing side because I'm an engineer and I'm sort of been responsible for all the outreach, and so that's not a great fit of skill sets. But we still have been doing a lot of work on the technical side, trying to improve stuff based on the feedback we got from the early deployments, which is that, as somebody else mentioned, what the data that's interesting to engineers is not necessarily the data that's interesting to the users. And so we've been working a lot on how to simplify that and how to come up with some cell phone apps. We've been thinking a lot about the same kind of data privacy issues and how do you make the data available? One of the things we know, we're getting data about every 6 minutes. And one of the things that really becomes clear when you have 6-minute data with not only air quality, but temperature, pressure, humidity, you see a lot about what's going on. And that data is fascinating, but you want to make sure that it's suitably anonymized when it's made public. So we've been also able to get other people to take this technology and go with it. There's a CUNY got an NSF grant that they're going to be taking these sensors to go study air quality issues more widely in Harlem and the Bronx. We've got some international, there's some people who are looking at doing some studies in India. Those sensors that I was showing you actually have a battery in them, so they can run without being connected to anything for about a week. They're not low enough power for really convenient solar power. It's because of the sensors themselves. The technology is just too high power. But there's a lot you can do with something that's relatively portable and relatively inexpensive, and really we've been deploying these sensors now for a couple of years, and so we know what the accuracy level is and so forth. So that's what we're doing. That if anybody's interested, the contact info is there, and we're happy to talk more about what we're doing.
Great, thank you so much, Terry. And I think that we'll also share the slide decks with everybody so you can go back and reference them. We have 5 minutes here, so I wanted to quickly go through some of the questions. Kate, you had some of them collected in the chat. Do you want to share some of those?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. So from Lewis, Judith, I think that you already answered, but I'll just say it out loud anyways. What is this is a question for Judith. What is the platform and the hardware you have to analyze your receiving data? Also, do you have downlinks to remotely program your sensors? Judith, do you want to just respond quickly what you said?
Yeah, well, it's a whole set of things that we put together from hardware, but we also use the Things network here to send the data from A to B. And we have set up a data platform it's of course open data with an API for people to get the data themselves. And what you see is that people in the sensing communities actually take the data and make their own visualizations with it. So we have our sort of central visualization, but also people take the data and create their own insights. I shared in the chat some reference to the website. It's in Dutch, but the images are quite nice and informative, but also to the GitHub where we have some of the hardware information stored. So you can take a look there.
Awesome. Great. Next question was from Marilyn. It's, if you're asking what I want to know, it's why is New York City still in violation of the original 1970 Clean Air Act and its amendments, and what's being done to bring New York City into compliance? Anyone have any insight into that answer?
I think that's more my bailiwick. So bringing New York City into compliance is a whole issue in and of itself. I mean, first of all, the first step is making sure that we can actually share the data. I think specifically one area that I am very concerned about with this is looking at air quality in public transportation. Greg made a great point of, when they were doing their study going in Miami, going in particularly minority neighborhoods in public transportation. In New York City, I find that is a particular issue that has gone very much unreported. We have some air quality sensors that are run by DOH above ground, but underground is DOT's entire region. So they do have some air quality measurements, but they don't really share them. There have been some individuals that have gone around and shared some of the information, and it is damning from what we have seen. But the first step is making sure that we can actually share the information with the public. And that way, elected officials and offices like ours can advocate on people's behalf. So it really comes down to sharing information and having an open communication, which is why I think the ideals of the open data community in this specific area are so important.
Thank you, Daniel. From Lewis, this is a question for Gregory. Is Miami not doing their own air quality monitoring? And if so, are they sharing their results with the community?
Yeah, and I responded to that privately. So I know when we talk about air monitoring, there's like the big kind of like stationary devices that we see the EPA have. But when it comes to low cost sensors, we have not seen a lot of those. And the low cost sensors are unique because then you can kind of go into these communities like Daniel was saying that are kind of unreported. So no, we haven't seen a lot of scaling of low cost sensors around air monitoring for the city and Miami-Dade County outside of the work that we're doing. But we're hoping we can kind of steward a model and kind of prioritize how we can get that there. And through our feedback, speaking with the county, they love it. When we show them the sensors that they had, they're like, let us know when you're trying to get to 100 or 1,000 sensors, because we're really interested in how we can like leverage that data. So the willingness is there. And I think what we're fleshing out is that model of how do you engage the public which is so needed right now and today as we look at like where sensors are in surveillance and privacy and how consumers and residents feel.
Yeah, for sure. This is from Judith to Wendy. Do you have a reference to story voice that you mentioned that you were considering to collect the qualitative data of the participants?
Yes, we've been looking at something called Pixstory, Pixstory. It's a really simple app, and of course, any language works, but it lacks location. So we're actually looking, can we take that data and actually map it? I'm my day job, I'm the director of Green Map System, and we have a new open mapping platform. We did a talk about it on Tuesday, so you can see it here, but will that work? So that's one of the unknown questions right now. There might be something else, Judith, that you know that already makes this even easier.
Well, so far we do it offline, so with little diaries, but we are looking for alternatives. So that's why I was interested.
Yeah, there's lots of questions about, personal privacy and things like that when doing story voice. So it's another, another issue. I don't know if anyone else can add to that.
Yeah, if you do, put it in the chat. So another question is, are there any resources to do-it-yourself indoor filters? I guess links to share of how to build them or information?
We have started at LES Breathe to collect kind of a little library of them, and some are tested better than others. But to me, that's one of the really exciting kind of mutual aid projects that can come out of this that could involve lots of folks. I want to say that East River Park Action.org will add a page in the Breathe section where you can find the video from this today, and I'll add the links that we have for air filtering there too. And maybe we can make that a little place to put information related to this panel. So we can link the slideshow, et cetera there.
And
Wendy,
I wonder also,
Go ahead, sorry.
Wendy, would you mind sharing a link to the site in the chat just so that people
Sure.
can?
I was gonna say, I wonder if Public Lab has any resources on that too. They would, if not, that'd be a great collaboration. If you don't know Public Lab, definitely check it out. They're a national organization that does interesting citizen science projects.
And they do have some up there. This is to me an untapped reserve of innovation that we can jump into.
And another question is, do we think we'll have filter inserts to put in our noses one day? If it gets that bad, is anyone working on that? That's my question. Actually, I have another question I just put in my list. And it was kind of towards Gregory and Sruti, who have sort of done this holistic approach and been involved in a lot of steps in bringing partners together. If you created a checklist for a community, what would you put on it if they wanted to get started monitoring air quality and like sharing the data in their community? Like, who would need to be involved and like what sort of resources would they need?
I think I'll let Greg answer that first because I think you've done more on the groundwork.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We just pushed a checklist feature that has many of these same things. I think first it's about understanding what the goal is. Oftentimes when people think about like sensors and we see conversations with organizations, it's what's the return on investment or what's the impact? So first off, what's the goal? And then as you kind of define that goal and the metrics towards it, where do you want to put the sensors? I think that's very key, kind of like mapping those things out. And then when you get to a place where you kind of understand the goal and where you want to put the sensors, it's also about figuring out the right vendor to kind of like bring these sensors in. I think talks or discussions don't really look at like, what's the quality or what's the data integrity of what the sensor is going to bring. It's different from a $20 sensor versus a $100 sensor. And as you pull that data in, if you're pulling in messy or not reliable data, that can lead to some things that you don't want. So I think figuring out those three things are what we point people to. And outside of that, on our checklist, what we do have is like a vendor list. So there's a bunch of sensors, purple air, there's a bunch of stuff. And what we've done for our side is create just a list of how we've gone about the process of connecting these things. And sometimes we tell partners or people that, hey, you may not have the capacity or staff to go out and actually set these things up. So here are some providers in the neighborhood that could do that for you. So I think those are the steps that I would kind of outline at a high level.
Lovely. Yeah, that's totally correct up front. Like, what is the goal? Okay, from Salil. Hi, Salil. Nice to see you. Any resources on easily and cheaply available do-it-yourself air quality sensors?
So there actually is, it's called sensor.community that outlines how to create your own air quality sensor. They have some guides on how to put that together. I can look up the link and put it in the chat. And just to add to what Gregory had said about looking at different low-cost sensor providers. So the South Coast Air Quality Management District in California actually has a program called AQ Spec where they evaluate a bunch of air quality sensors. So you can see like how do they measure up to regulatory monitors. So that could be a good resource to start looking at when you're deciding what kind of sensor you want to use. I'll put that link to that in the chat.
Great. We have a few more from Carolyn.
Oh yeah.
What about? What? Gonna mute you.
Yeah.
Mute. Sorry. Sorry. From Carolyn. What about monitoring Con Edison emissions at East 14th Street and Avenue C? Their stacks are still dumping pollutants in East Village, Lower East Side. That is a good pin. I would love to see a map of where everybody would like to monitor air quality. That's a fun participatory activity, I think. So I don't think that there's do you have an answer to that, Wendy, or anyone? I think that's a great idea. And it would be cool to know more about where people would like to see monitors. From Judith, Terry, there is much community discussion on indoor pollution at the Gowanus and Newton Creek Superfund areas. Have you thought of contacting the community advisory groups in both? If they were interested in either or both of them, would you want to do a presentation?
I'd be happy to, so the last year, there's not been a lot of networking going on, but we're keenly interested in enabling other people to take advantage of what we've done and having the exchange of information that comes from that. So if you guys can share me some, make some introductions, I'll be happy to jump on that.
Great. Oh, and sorry, maybe that wasn't from Judith. I copied that incorrectly, I think. Okay, next question, I believe it's from Mark. Mm-hmm.
I think that is the same question as the one before. I think it got copied twice. So the next question is, anyone looking at air quality related human health data for 2020 to see if there have been any changes during the pandemic? Flu season cases and deaths dropped significantly due to COVID mitigation. This is something I'm very interested in chatting about as well. I know that Wendy had a great slide on it as well in her presentation, but have, the rest of you have been kind of keeping up with air monitoring over the past year. You've seen any overlap in high COVID infection rates or mortality rates in areas with worse air quality, and have you been able to share that information with those communities at all?
I think early on, it was some of the first maps made showing in New York City when we were, a year ago, when this was the big red spot, really followed poverty lines and pollution lines. And it was stark immediately. But where I think it was Greg, you put up the slide that said what percent increase meant how much more COVID. Is it 1% increase for 8% more? Was that correct?
I don't think so. Let me check back to that slide.
Okay. But
I'd
you know
also
that-
be interested in the indoor versus outdoor though, because we're spending a lot more time at home. And you know, maybe we're not cleaning our houses as much, or we don't have the windows open during winter. So like depending on the air quality in your home, it could be that you're being subjected to more unhealthy air quality, or depending on where you were going to work, maybe it's the opposite.
Meanwhile, outdoor, you're not having as many commuters, you're having a lot of people staying in one spot, so you're going to see a lot less of some of those, you know, more common pollutants happening outdoors.
For sure.
I actually have to drop off, but I wanted to add that I put a link to the State of Global Air report that the Health Effects Institute and IHME does every year. And they look at air quality and health. And I'm guessing they did some analysis on how the pandemic must have affected air quality and human health as well.
Greg, thank you so much, Sruti, for joining us. Gregory, I saw you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
No, I was just going to add to that. You know, for us, as we were doing this work, I quickly realized, you know, I'm not an air quality expert. I'm a technologist at heart. So as we're looking at like outcomes and like how we support this work and finding the right partners, what we did was say at the local level, how is this impacting people? Some of the use cases we found, or the personas, if you will, is, you know, the family that's low income that has a child, or somebody in that family that has asthma. We also looked at kind of like the policy driven design model, which is like, what are some policies that directly connect with the need of air quality sensors indoor and outdoor? For that, we looked at HUD, and HUD, I don't know when the year is, but recently for public housing, now there is like a policy saying that all of the public housing units need to have carbon monoxide detectors. So for us, as we're kind of looking at outcomes, we're looking at like, what are the places that don't have carbon monoxide detectors? How can we bring those in? If we bring those in, how we can connect those to outcomes? What we found is approaching it in that stance makes it a lot easier to find funders or people to back it, because then you can kind of connect it to some of these things, even if it's just theories. And that's what we've been kind of like focusing on the ground level here.
Fantastic. I don't think we have any more questions in the chat. If you all have anything else that you want to follow up with, I'm sure we can connect you with some of our panelists and answer some of those. I'll put my email in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to me as well. Thank you to all of our panelists for the excellent conversation. I know we went a little bit over time, but I feel like that's kind of standard with this. So thank you again so much, and thank you everyone for attending as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy, Daniel, Gregory,
Thanks
Sruti, Judith.
Thanks for organizing. Very interesting to meet you all.
Yes, thank you, Judith. I hope we can have some follow-up questions. Follow-up discussions. I know we're certainly going to be looking at where there's air quality data that's not open, and if there's ways to make it open and things like that. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I would love to continue the conversation, so feel free to reach out.
Great. Me too. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.